Welcome to our show, Media Monitor. I'm your host, Alicia Jali. Thank you for joining us here on the SABC News Channel. As usual at this time, we bring you up to speed with the stories that are making news headlines. It's 9 a.m. Central African Time. Good morning. ACDP promises better governance should it be elected into power. The party delivered its 2016 local government election manifesto in Thokoza, east of Johannesburg. The party leader also preached about the importance of Christian values. Heads are expected to roll after damning allegations contained in the Jobs for Cash report released by Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga. The task team recommended those found guilty to be axed from their jobs and be arrested. South Africa's Sevens team produced a satisfactory performance on day one of the London series. The Blitzbokke remained unbeaten to qualify for the quarterfinals in a tightly contested Pool A. President Jacob Zuma has lashed out at students who destroy property during protests. He was speaking at the centenary of Fort Hare, which saw violent protests on the eve of the celebrations.
Allow me at this point to refer to the destruction of public assets.
We can run our own affairs in Africa. But no, you get countries like France, Francophone, Anglophone, they come with their underhand and want to affect our systems. Lots of NGOs. Every country in Africa, you will get about 1,000, 3,000 NGOs, which are supported by either France or both France, Britain, America, etc. And America has been quite open. They say they can change regimes, regime change. And in Zimbabwe, they have said, we will have regime change. I have said, never, ever. And that is one reason I have stuck on. I want to prevent regime change. It will never come.
All right, it's time for a quick break. We'll be back with more Media Monitor shortly after that.
What's wrong with Triple M? What is illegal here? Who is being defrauded here, Trevor?
It is about the best interest of the citizens of this country.
But the citizens are the ones who are playing, who are members or participants in this. If you put in 50,000 rand, after 12 months you get 1.2 million rands. I mean, who wouldn't go for this?
Watch Question Time with me, Mpho Tsedu, Monday to Thursday at 5:30 p.m. on the SABC News Channel.
In Buphelong, we celebrate those who take strides doing good and changing the world.
I really think that education has to be revisited, and it's an integral part of teaching young people skills of the future.
There's always light at the end of the tunnel.
I think that the treatment should be made available, actually, because it's costly. Growth hormones are very, very costly.
Where there is a challenge, we bring hope.
I'm alive. And the brain tumor is gone.
Join your host Buleng Malabati every Friday at 17:30 for more uplifting stories.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. The Constitutional Court has ruled in favor of the Gauteng Education Department regarding its school admissions regulations. This after the Federation of Governing Bodies of South African Schools approached the court asking to give school governing bodies control of the admissions process.
This court holds that the regulations are reasonable and justified and are not at odds with Section 5.5 of the Schools Act. The HOD's power to determine learner enrollment capacity and to declare whether a school is full or not assists the MSC to ensure that there are enough school places for every child, and every such child is placed in a school to learn.
We're saying allow those parents that have the capability and the financial power to take their children to any school that they want to do so. That don't stop them on the basis that wants to see their salary slips, that wants to know where they stay, and that you want to prove indeed they're fit to be in your school.
The Constitutional Court has ruled in favor of the Gauteng Education Department regarding its school admissions regulations. This after the Federation of Governing Bodies of South African Schools approached the court asking to give school governing bodies control of the admissions process.
One other person has been shot dead and another is in a critical condition in hospital.
The CRL has laid charges against controversial televangelist Paseka Mutsoneng.
More than 1.3 million South Africans have been added in the past two registration weekends.
The International Monetary Fund warns that policy uncertainty could dampen economic growth in South Africa.
And all eyes are on the new Bok coach, Alicia Jali. He's challenged to keep everyone in the country happy.
A very good afternoon. You're watching the Midday Report.
Lunchtime news amplified.
But for now, this is what they call home. Their hope to shift to a higher ground seems to be against the tide.
Midday Report provides you with more than just news stories.
I just want Port Elizabeth to know that they own a world-class theatre.
Good afternoon. You're with the news at 1 in the headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. This is News Live. I'm Natasha Thorpe. Let's take a quick look at what's coming up in your headlines.
Good afternoon and welcome to A View from the House.
For all things news, tune in to Midday Report weekdays at 12 noon only on the SABC News Channel.
You've heard it before. If at first you don't succeed, try again. Alfred Matamela is a testimony to this. Born and bred in Limpopo, the famous instructor, biker, spinner, now owns the biggest and the very first biking school in Soweto.
I grew up looking after my uncle goats and cattle. Even when I had matric, to get jobs were not easy. And then that is where I started thinking of getting into learning to ride a bike.
King Donut has always known what he wanted to do with his life.
I worked about 18 years as a scooter driver, and then till it was just like a calling that, no, why can't I open a school to teach other people how easy it is to ride a bike?
King Donut runs the very successful Soweto Riding School. He provides bike riding lessons not only in how to safely ride on public roads of South Africa, but also offers assistance in riders getting their bike learners and full licenses.
How Soweto Motorbike School was started. It was started in 2008, but I started doing it part-time. I used to work from morning till 12, after 12. I used to knock off, and the boss I used to work for was a biker, a very supportive guy, Richard Olfsen. So he allowed me to work in the morning, afternoon, then I go for training. I used to take my bikes on my bike to work. After work then, I used to do training. This is the first biking school in Soweto.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. Now, earlier this week, we observed the disruption that led to the physical removal of EFF from Parliament. The violent visuals of the fracas soon went viral on social media, raising further questions about issues of safety and laws governing Parliament. And as the week progressed, we learned that charges of malicious damage to property have been laid against the party. It also transpired the EFF leader sneaked his bodyguard to Parliament. Last year, Parliament announced that it has tightened its rules in a bid to control disruptions in the House. But the latest developments show that little has been achieved since the implementation or tightening of those rules. And for this discussion, I'm now joined by political analyst, Professor Lesiba Defo from our Pretoria studios. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. A very good morning to you.
Good morning to you and the listeners.
Professor, look, just now in November, the joint committee sat together to try and put together rules on how to deal with chaos that ensues in Parliament. And then we see this just in less than 6 months. What was your overall take of the disruptions that happened?
Well, the disruptions are inelegant, unpalatable, and unacceptable. That's a given. But what we don't seem to look at, there is cause and effect. These are a consequence of a malaise that the society doesn't want to address. These are the results of a government that at one stage used state protocols and decorum and rules of parliament to stifle debate. Now you have new actors, new players in the system who are saying we are ready to change the rules of the game. And these rules must benefit and enable the truth to be told, and the rule of law to be upheld, and justice to be meted without fear or favor. There are challenges, and these are the symptoms of the failure of the system to live up to the expectations, wishes, and ideals that informed the birth of 1994.
Professor, look, I have to ask you, what is this then doing to the country's image, to the public perception of the voters, and of course those who fought so hard for our democracy?
Well, look, it is doing a lot of damage. This morning, as I was doing one of the interviews, I said, by the by, we once the leading economy of the world, of the continent. We were a moral standard bearer for the continent. But today I'm told we are number 3 in terms of the strength of our economy, right? It's now today's Nigeria, is Egypt, we are number 3. In terms of moral standing, yes, indeed. I think we have taken a serious knock. And I attribute all this to the failure of the leadership of this country. Why is it that under Mbeki, Mhlante and Mandela, we didn't see what we are seeing today? Shouldn't the country ask itself, had we not had the men presiding over matters of state today, would we be where we are? And if indeed we are here precisely because of that, what needs to be done? We all know what should be done, but it does look like those who have the wherewithal to change the course of history, they are looking after their stomachs. Hence, people talk about the politics of the stomach. It is not the right thing that's happening in Parliament, but we must also look at the source, the causes thereof.
But Prof, would you call this then political intolerance, or what, in your view, is this related to?
I think both parties have taken uncompromising stance, which are detrimental to the interests of the country. Okay? I'm suggesting that perhaps we need a third party now. Yesteryears, we had men and women of moral integrity who could intervene and help reconcile apartheid leaders with liberation movements. I don't think the law in this instance, it doesn't matter what legislation they come up with. The matter is attitudinal, and I think we have got men and women of integrity in the country and outside. Let them call the two parties, sit down with them, that this is detrimental to the country. But for as long as you and I read in the media, right, the abuse of state power, abuse of state resources, and those who stand up to say, surely these are not yours. They are intended to serve to the at least the wretched of the earth, the poorest of the poor. And you want to raise the rule book to say, thou shalt not raise those concerns. Unfortunately, I think it's a bit too late today to use the rule book to stifle discourse. As it failed, of course, to stifle discourse under apartheid.
Professor, look, what do you say to the perception that certain parties are now robbing the majority of their right to be part of those robust debates that we need so much in this country?
Look, there is no question that we need to have a robust debate. And we know for a fact there wasn't adequate robust debate. Shall we call it, the DA in the past, it did its best. But remember, there would always be at least this retort: you are racist, you are white, you are anti-black. But that has lost currency, all right? And I think the new player has engendered a different culture of engagement. And this culture is not inimical to political discourse. We see it across the globe. People engage robustly, but I still maintain within the parameters of the law, within the limits of decency. Let's do it, but at least let's respect the law. Let's respect protocol. Let's respect decorum. But don't use those to stifle discourse at the same time.
Professor, stay right there, because I'm going to need you in a short amount of time. Alleged reports of attacks on Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan persisted this week, with also new rumors of his possible arrest making rounds. Political differences are fingered to be at the center of the ongoing public spat and investigation of Minister Gordhan by the Hawks. Professor, let's welcome you back on this discussion again. I mean, we need to tread very carefully on this matter. And I really, really want you to clarify this matter. There's been certain reports in the public domain that have been sort of misleading. Let's really understand, in your view, what could be going on here.
Yeah, I think I didn't pick up the last sentence. It didn't come out clear.
Yes, Professor, I'm saying we need to tread carefully on this matter. I really need you to address some of the misleading information that has been in the public domain. I want to hear from your perspective, what do you think is really going on here?
In relation to who? Gordhan?
In relation to Pravin Gordhan, yes.
Oh, yes. In relation to Minister Pravin Gordhan. No, well, look, I detected some agony as he was speaking. And then somebody said to me, the more things change, the more they remain the same. En route to Polokwane, state resources were used against political opponents. And I hear the same people who decried that then saying that they are today the victims of same, and who's now the presiding officer in that regard. And I'm saying, Gordon is saying to us, I'm a victim of the machinations of yesteryears. And I never thought my own party, that I gave it my all to bring the country where it is today, could turn against me. And then the most telling statement is the one that invites you and I to say, let's rally around and defend this democracy. Let's defend the treasury. Let's defend Chapter 9 institutions. The country is unraveling, but it still has the capacity within itself to save itself from itself. And I'm saying the ruling party must also pause and make some introspection. But some might argue it's a bit too late. The corruption of cancer has gone to the marrow, and it is not the ruling party that can save itself from itself.
Look, Professor, let's talk more about the NPA and the Hawks' role in this matter. What have you made of their comments in regards to the stuff that has been put out in the public domain?
Well, unfortunately, certain state institutions have been politicized, infiltrated, and political hacks have also been embedded in those state institutions. I find it ironic indeed and despicable in the extreme that the very people who decried the use of state resources against political opponents are themselves today, right, the protagonists of same. Remember the demise of the Scorpions. What were the allegations? What was the modus operandi of the time at the time? It's the same thing that we are seeing here. If you listen to McBride and others who are saying we want to expose corruption and the use of state resources against certain individuals to vilify, renounce and denounce in order to weaken them politically, it all says that institution is too politicized. We need to appoint people on merit and merit only. People can have political affiliations, political identity, but let not that supersede and inform how you operate, because certain offices really do want people who can operate without fear or favor.
Look, Professor, you speak of merit here. I mean, we all know that the minister was entrusted to do a turnaround of South Africa's current economic crisis, as well as a possible ratings downgrade, and has been widely applauded for this. What do you make of the remarks that have followed after that then? Does this mean that the nation does not trust him as a finance minister?
Well, the nation trusts him. Remember, he's one of the most competent, capable, and respected political leaders in this country, no doubt about that. And his pedigree, politically speaking, his performance since he assumed public office, I mean, is commendable. As a commissioner of SARS, you and I might have been a victim of those, but we are the beneficiaries of his capabilities. And I say kudos to him. That's one. But look, Bhavin might have, in my opinion, have treaded or trampled on the toes of other people. And some suspect that if you were to remove him, it would be a free-for-all in the treasury. People are fighting him because they want to have access to the national granary, to the national treasury. Not so much because he's bad. I keep hearing people say there are best qualified people who could handle that job better. But why did we, after the removal of Nene, suffer the consequence we did? Why, once we heard that he was about to be detained, then we immediately saw the rand tumble? It tells you there is confidence in the capabilities of this man. He's doing a wonderful job. But if you and I don't defend him and those who are helping him, we shall suffer the consequences. Professor,
look, let's not forget this, that the presidency has come out time and again stating that the reports that have been put in the public domain of the so-called spat between the president and the minister are actually not facts. I mean, the relationship between the president and the minister is quite a normal one. But this keeps popping up elsewhere, and it keeps popping up with something else that is infringed to it.
Yes, look, who's giving you and I this information, by the way? Right? Who's feeding the public this information? It comes from within the system itself. It comes from within the institutions themselves, all right? And hence we are saying, in the court of public opinion, perceptions counts a lot. It doesn't matter how good Gordon is, but there will always be this sense that perhaps indeed there is something that he must answer to. And if there is, I say, let him do so. But there is something we call residual mud. There is an understanding, the more we hammer him, certainly as a human being, he will be weakened. And if you heard his tenor and his tone and he was speaking, you would say, yes, it is beginning to have its toll on him. But at the same time, I also detected some resoluteness that if you support me and the people of South Africa rally around the Treasury, we shall continue to march forward. And I think it behoves you and I to ensure that he is supported and Taptanan's institutions are equally supported.
Professor, stay right there. We're going to take a very quick ad break. We'll be back with more Media Monitor. Do stay with us.
To be African is beautiful. To be African is a privilege.
It represents hard work. It represents being able to stand on your own.
And respecting other cultures as well.
It's about promoting African heritage.
We are all Africans. Let's come together so that we can have a formidable force.
Our cultures interlink with one another.
And by standing together and embracing one another, you know, there's power in unity.
It is time to cut off this issue of xenophobia.
I stand for African unity. I stand for promoting unity in Africa because
there are many opportunities
to be whatever you want to be.
Africa is one of the most important continents.
Because if we can come together as one, we will be able to actually build a better Africa, the new Africa for the future. And if we unite our hearts and our minds together and we go forward, we will conquer.
So let us all arise and be proudly African.
Being an African is who I am right now.
I'm proudly African. I love Africa.
Wishing you all a very happy Africa Month.
One love.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. I'm still with Professor Leseba Defo, who's joining us from our Pretoria studios. Now, Professor, earlier we spoke about Fort Hare celebrations, and among other things, the institution is very well known for having produced outstanding leadership, giving back to students, of course, quality education during the apartheid era. What do you then make of the protests that have become common in the country, where students are burning the property that is supposed to give them a brighter future?
Violence begets violence. The culture you nurture is the culture that you may not cry foul when it yields consequences, militating or vitiating against that which you want to achieve. Under apartheid, there were men and women who advised, pursue the cause of liberation. But if you use the matchboxes, this culture of matchboxes might be too difficult to eradicate. And that culture has caught up with us. Some of you might recall the old lady Winnie Mandela, who said, we shall use the matchboxes to redeem and to liberate this country. Now, unfortunately, precedence says to me, in many instances, when people invoke violence, especially in my country, they tend to be listened to and their demands are acceded to. You had Mirafong, demarcations, you had Matatiele, you had Malamulele, last week you had Vuani. And oftentimes we come up with a political solution after there's been a lot of fire and damage and hurt. And then you see the same thing happening in the universities. At what cost? Yes, you and I know. But I think we must look for a third wave. We must look for an alternative route, because violence, it cannot lead us anywhere. As Martin Luther King said, unless we begin to understand that we must work together, we'll perish together as fools. And we are getting there.
Professor, where do we start these debates? I mean, where are we failing these students? We hear reports that it's the students themselves that are sometimes failing to meet with management or even listen to management at that point.
Yes, but you see, it's not very difficult. I've been in university management for over 20 years. It's not very difficult and complicated. It's the political elite, right, who influence and encourage student party politics.
How so,
Get rid of student party politics.
How so?
Pardon?
How so?
Oh, yes, it's very easy. And it has happened across the globe, and I studied even in universities abroad. And even outside South Africa, you go to Botswana, you go to Lesotho, that happens. Students should remain politically active. There is no question about that. But when party politics becomes the modus operandi, then necessarily students are accountable to party politicians, and they no longer see themselves as students. They are given money, they are used against management, they are used against other students in order to advance party politics. I'm not saying they must be apolitical. I'm saying get rid of party politics and nurture a culture of political tolerance. They are there to study. Let's make them understand we're preparing them to take political leadership. And in the meantime, they must practice politics, but within the limits of modesty, rules, procedures, and protocols.
Professor, you know, Fort Hare is lauded and known for having produced 5 heads of states since its inception. Let's talk about the struggle of the students back then and the struggle of students now. How would you relate the two?
Well, human nature evolves, it's dynamic, circumstances change. We are the consequences of the material conditions in which we find ourselves. Yesterday's leaders operated under different environments from what we have today. We accept that, we concede that. The ideals that imbued them to go to school and to fight for the liberation of the country are different from what we have today. You have got less quality in parliament in terms of the pursuit of the ideals of liberation and service to the people. Okay? And then I'm saying, can our leadership today just take a page from the book of yesterday's leaders? And I'm sure they are capable of that. And they can serve their country a lot better. I'm not talking about South Africa. I'm talking about the continent. It is about public service. It's about service to the other rather than to the self. It's about the empowerment of the wretched of the earth. And that's why most of them, to date, we still hold them very, very dearly. And they are worthy of emulation. And I hope we do so.
Professor, but where do we then start these debates to try and bridge this gap? As you rightly pointed out, it has become a political debate or interference when it comes to the educational sphere.
Again, no rocket scientists wanted here. I'm saying, you know, we come from a culture about Ubuntu. Once we say respect for the other would be paramount when we engage. That even when we engage in political discourse and contestation, it will be within certain rules and procedures. And Ubuntu will be at the center of that. I can assure you, you will go a long way. The problem is, and I often say, go to Botswana and see what a model of democracy they are. Unfortunately, my people are seeing political office and political contesting as a vehicle to access state resources for self-enrichment and empowerment. Let's engage in debates that says when you assume public office, it's for the service of the public. Chapter 10 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa talks about the values and the principles that should imbue public servants. Public servant means starting by the head of state. So when we nurture that culture, we educate people and we engage along those lines and we understand that it's about the other and not the self, I can assure you we'll go some distance. Because there are examples, by the way, just beyond the borders of South Africa, of working systems where people work for the people and not for themselves.
Professor, thank you so much for your time here on Media Monitor and your views today. That is Professor Leseba Defo, and he was joining us from our Pretoria studios. Let's take a very quick ad break. We'll be back with more shortly after this.
News Today keeps you informed with news locally and around the world.
When Judge John Hlophe challenged the Supreme Court of Appeal when it sent the matter back and said that there must be an inquiry set up.
We unpack business news.
There's an increase in general inflation in the country.
We give you up-to-date news of the day.
The drugs were seized at several locations in Sydney, including a shipping container sent from Hong Kong. Police say it's the largest haul of illicit drugs in 2 years.
We round up sports news.
Kotata, tell me about the legacy that you would like to build and be remembered for.
Trying to get my foundation running, which is going to focus on, all the sport, doesn't matter disability or able body. So, I'm passionate about sports.
Stay informed every Monday to Friday from 3 to 5:30 p.m. CAT. SABC News.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. Now, the body of one of two mine workers trapped underground following a rockfall at Impala Platinum Mine near Rustenburg in the northwest has been brought to the surface. Rescue teams are still trying to secure the other miners that are still trapped. Meanwhile, it's almost 100 days since a sinkhole led to the closing of Lily Gold Mine out in Mpumalanga. A container lamp room with 3 workers inside is still trapped underground. And for this story, I'm very pleased to be joined by Parliament Chairperson of Portfolio Committee on Mineral Resources, Mr. Sahlulele Luzipo, who is joining us from our Durban studio. Sir, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning to you and good morning to the listeners at home.
Look, mine safety is now really becoming a serious issue in the country. What ways is government engaging with mine owners to try and eradicate this problem?
Look, first let me extend our condolences to the families of the mine worker whose body was discovered in the Impala Platinum mines, and hopefully believe that we will be able to recover the other one that has not been found as yet. And also, as we have said, that we are now almost 100 days since the Lily Mine disaster that had happened. And we continue to try and find solutions on how best we can be able to address that situation, which obviously now we can say it's a crisis. With regards to the issues of mine health and safety, I think it's important also to note that in as much as there have been declined, we have been consistent, particularly as a portfolio committee, to say one death is one too many. And in our view, we'll highly appreciate if we were not to be able to report any fatalities in any financial year. Because when we talk about statistics, sometimes we forget that we're talking about lives of living individuals, people who were bringing food on the table for their own families. And therefore, we can safely say that we're looking forward to the proposed amendments on the Mine Health and Safety Act. We would be quite appreciative if this, as we know now, it will be marking 20 years since the Act came into being in 1996. And we think that it's important, therefore, to strengthen that particular legislation so that we can be able to address issues of this nature.
Speaking of amendments, Chair, are there stringent measures that mine owners might have to undertake now before sending workers underground? Is there going to be a form of regulation, penalty system to hold them accountable?
Look, I think it might be quite dangerous to say there can be penalties when there is a loss of life, because a penalty in a loss of life, it actually means that you can substitute a life. In our view, we think that surely when you take people to do production and contribute in the GDP of this country, those people should not be treated as if are individuals who are going to war. Any worker who goes to work, particularly in the mining industry, is going to work in order, beside personal benefits that will be accrued in terms of salaries and other related benefits, is doing so in order to contribute in the economy of this country. And therefore, we can't have a situation where workers go to work as if going to work is going to war. Obviously, there is anticipation when individuals goes to war that anything, fatalities can be expected. So we need now a situation where, beside guarantees, we must be certain that when they go underground to work, every necessary measure for their own safety is undertaken. So that is what we are looking for. But obviously, the amendments for now, in terms of the department's report, are sitting, having gone through NEDLEC, are sitting with the interministerial committee, and we are looking forward that those amendments will be brought to the committee so that we can be able to scrutinize them and ensure that we've got legislation that has got teeth to bite.
Are you able to tell us, Chair, that between the Lily Gold Mine debacle and now this latest incident, what role is government playing there specifically?
Look, I think the first issue that is concerning, I think we must address the issue of Impala Platinum. You will recall that there was a similar incident last year, towards the end of last year, and there have been similar incidents at the beginning of this year, where 4 workers also died because of fire. And this is now the third one. And obviously, if we have got such incidences, because what we have asked also the department and government to do is that we would want to have a breakdown. Who are what we would call in inverted commas habitual criminals? Because we don't want to treat, there are companies that are complying, but what is worrying in terms of the trend is that some of the companies that are not in compliance with the law are companies that would say these are major contributors in the GDP, and we want to say those big companies are the ones who must set the precedent. For an example, amongst other issues, the leading industries is gold and platinum. So we want now to see a situation where we must be able to distinguish others, because if one company can live for a full financial year without any fatalities, what is it that stops other companies to follow suit? So in our view is that we should also eliminate this compliance by others and non-compliance by that. We also think that the legislation, like you have seen in terms of your road fatalities, that we must make the legislation, because if you take someone to go underground when you cannot guarantee safety, it's equally the same to someone who is in a public transport who cannot be guaranteed safety, and therefore you must have hefty sentences. But all those issues we have also to look in terms of the legal framework. So in our view, there is a lot that we need to do, but we must also appreciate the fact that as I've said, we are quite sensitive in terms of using statistics. But since 1993, we are moving from more than 600 fatalities that have been reported. In the last financial year, we only had about 77. But we still say that 77 on its own is still very high. We want to see non-fatalities in a manner that will satisfy even families wherever they are.
Look, Chairperson, workers' rights are enshrined in our constitution. What do you say then to those that claim that government is not heavily involved when it comes to the workers of the miners?
Look, I think the first issue, even if it's minimal, we must also be able to appreciate, as I've stated initially, that we are moving from more than 600 fatalities that have been reported in the mining industry since 1993. And as I've said, that in the last financial year we had 77. But we're not talking about 77 as if it's not lives of individuals. We're saying there is a need to guarantee the lives of individuals as it is enshrined in the Constitution. For an example, amongst other issues, the mining industry, I think it's a known fact, under the previous dispensation, it has been the most notorious one. We have discovered, for an example, in Evander in Mpumalanga, that there are about more than 1,000 graves that are unaccounted for of mine workers. We will never know whether those mine workers, some of them, it was not due to lung diseases and other related illnesses. It could also be a question of unreported cases, fatalities. So in our view is that there is a lot of transformation that is happening, but we would appreciate the situation where, rather than to use regulation mostly, that the mining bosses must also come voluntarily and ensure that in as much as they are looking forward to profit, but also life must remain a priority in that process.
Look, Chairperson, I'm very happy that we have you here today because we've been asking this question every time on this matter. The issue of disused mines spurring the Zamazama illegal trade, there's been numerous calls for government to try and intervene here. What's being done around this? I mean, who's really supposed to close those mines?
It's quite a tough one. For an example, in the report that we have received in terms of the cost that we could be incurred, we require about more than 42 billion rands in order to address the issue of both illegal mining, particularly around issues of derelict and ownerless mines. Part of the problem that we've raised is that, unfortunately, due to the absence of legislation in the past, we have a situation now that some of the companies have run away with murder because they are unable to account for the damage that they have called for failure to rehabilitate after a heavy excavation that has been done. Unfortunately, the current government has to take that particular joint responsibility. Part of the problem, obvious, is that some of the solutions that have been tried are solutions that, in essence, have helped the illegal mining process. For an example, everywhere you start to put something like cement on top of these disused mines,
yes,
that becomes an identification of a particular commodity that exists, and therefore the illegal miners or the zamazamas will go around. We have then said, probably, as well know that there is a court case that was the judgment that was made in the Supreme Court of Appeal, where the judge proposed that there is a need probably to create a particular law that is going to face directly the issue of illegal mining in this country. And that's one of the processes that we have said we need to consider. And we hope we'll be able to do so, because the problem with illegal mining is not only just illegal mining, it's also the criminal element that goes with it.
Absolutely.
And therefore it will require both the economic class and the criminal justice system to be able to work on a stringent legislation. But on top of that is that the Zamazamas, we must ask a question, where do they get the market? And probably the market could be the very same people who are in the formal trade in terms of the mining industry. But we're not saying it is the case, but surely there is a market. So as much as we deal with the issue of the actual practical exercise of illegal mining, we must deal also with the consequences, or with the upstream of that particular illegal trade.
Chairperson, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thank you so much for your time here. Chairperson of the Mineral Resources, Sahlulele Luzepo, he was joining us from our Durban studios. Now, the legal fraternity and the country as a whole bidded farewell to one of the greatest legal minds in the African continent, Judge Dikgang Moseneke. Until the time of his retirement, he served as a Deputy Chief Justice. South Africans from all walks of life wished Judge Moseneke a well-deserved rest and thanked him for his great contribution in our judiciary. Now this morning, President Jacob Zuma will preside over the National Day of Prayer in Durban. The prayer service will further promote unity and peaceful coexistence and encourage communities to continue fighting xenophobia, racism and any other form of intolerance. The event will also observe Africa Month. We now cross live to our reporter Blaine Herman, who's in Durban. Blaine, a very good morning to you. How significant is this prayer session and who's part of the events today?
Yeah, indeed, Alicia, it is indeed very significant. It is one of the more important days in terms of the National Day of Prayer. It's all about praying for, well, the further consolidation of democracy, praying for social cohesion, which is very important in South Africa. It's a normative idea which many countries are pursuing. We're praying for unity, and we're also praying for a peaceful and successful local government elections. Now, that is key, because I was just talking to the president's spokesperson earlier on, and he did say that the president is deeply concerned about the destruction of property during various protests around the country. Now, that, we're told, is going to be one of his main focuses when he addresses the crowds here. He's going to be giving the keynote address here at the Stadium for National Day of Prayer, and he's going to outline the significance of a day like this, looking forward to promoting unity, promoting a peaceful coexistence among many South Africans. Indeed, we've been going through a tough time in terms of social cohesion. If you listen back in terms of earlier on this year, there's been a plethora of slurs, racial slurs, that have really hurt the nation. And I think it's events like this that kind of bring together people in this country. Also, it's a packed program, we understand. Various religious leaders are here. We're told that leaders from civil society formations are here, as well as government officials. And news just in is that Premier Senzo Mchunu is no longer on the program. He's going to be replaced by Willis Mchunu, who is the MEC, KZN MEC for Safety, Transport and Liaison. So that's how it stands. Also, the other issue here, well, it's a celebration, I guess. It's Africa Month, and Africa Month runs during the month of May, so that will be observed here. So as you can see, Alicia, various elements to today.
Thank you so much to our reporter there on the scene as they observe a National Day of Prayer. That is Blaine Herman, live to us from Durban. This Day of Prayer is, of course, to promote social cohesion as well as unity amongst South African people. Now, that's a wrap of our show today. Thank you so much for choosing us. Do make a date with us right here on the SABC News Channel next week, Sunday, for another informative edition of Media Monitor. News is up next. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Goodbye.